I suppose I should start by saying that I used to love campfires. The crackling wood, the dancing flames, the way sparks would spiral up into the night sky like tiny lost stars, all of it. But that was before last October, before I learned that some fires don't want to die and some flames hunger for more than just wood and kindling. It started innocently enough. We had just moved into our new house, a modest two-story colonial with a spacious backyard that backed up against a stretch of woods. The previous owners had left behind a fire pit. Nothing fancy, just a circle of stones with some well-worn logs arranged around it for seating. Perfect for cool autumn evenings. That first night, we decided to break in the fire pit with a bottle of wine and some s'mores. Properly christen our new home. I remember being meticulous about building the fire, carefully arranging the kindling and smaller sticks into a perfect structure before adding the larger logs. But that's always been my way. I like things done right. The fire caught quickly, almost too quickly now that I think about it. The flames were oddly bright, more white than orange, but I chalked it up to the type of wood. Maybe the previous owners had left behind some treated lumber. I should have known better. Should have noticed how the shadows cast by the flames seemed to move oddly, how they stretched too long and too dark across our lawn. We stayed out late that night, talking about our plans for the house, our future. When the wine was gone, and the air grew too cold, I doused the fire with water from the garden hose. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. The flames didn't sputter or smoke like they should have. They seemed to absorb the water, almost eagerly, until they finally died down to glowing embers. "Coming to bed?" she called from the back door. I nodded, but something kept me standing there for a moment longer. Even after all that water, I could still see a faint orange glow in the pit. You know that feeling when you're sure you've unplugged the iron before leaving for vacation, but you still double check anyway? It was like that, except I just watched myself put that fire out. Maybe it was just residual heat, I told myself. Or maybe I was being paranoid after too much wine. Either way, I forced myself to go inside, though I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. I woke around 3 in the morning to use the bathroom. Through our bedroom window, I could see a faint glow from the backyard. My stomach dropped. Had I been too careless? I must have left some embers burning. I threw on my robe and hurried downstairs, trying not to wake anyone. The embers were still alive, which shouldn't have been possible. They pulsed with an inner light, not growing or spreading, but maintaining a constant, unwavering glow. I grabbed the hose again, but when the water hit them, they didn't dim. They just persisted. And then I heard it, a sound like whispers, barely audible, above the hiss of water on hot coals. That's when the real nightmare began. Over the next few weeks, I tried everything to extinguish that fire. I flooded the pit until the ground turned to mud. The water would eventually evaporate, and the embers would still be there, pulsing. I covered them with dirt. The dirt burned away. I placed a steel plate over the pit. Within days, the metal began to glow red hot, then white hot, until it melted away like ice in summer. The fire consumed it with an almost methodical patience, as if it were merely waiting out this latest obstacle, knowing that nothing I placed in its way would matter in the end. And all the while, the fire grew. Slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice at first. From embers to flames, from flames to a steady burn that never wavered, never smoked, never needed fuel. Just burned and burned and burned. My wife noticed it too. How could she not? The way our houseplants would lean away from the windows, facing the backyard, how our cat refused to go outside anymore. The strange, sweet smell that would drift through the house at night, like burning sugar mixed with something metallic. We tried getting help. The fire department came 3 times. The first time, they doused it with their heavy-duty equipment and declared it out. By morning, it was burning again. The second time, they dug up the entire pit, searching for gas lines or hidden fuel sources. They found nothing. The third time, I saw the fear in their eyes when their water had no effect. They stopped coming after that. The neighbors noticed too, though they tried to pretend they didn't. I'd catch them watching from their windows, drawing their curtains quickly when I looked their way. I'd catch their sidelong glances when I was out buying more fire extinguishers, their whispered conversations at the mailbox. Once, I overheard whispers among them about how the new couple was weird, and how I'd lost it, spending every night staring at that fire pit. Maybe that's what made it all worse, being so alone with something impossible, watching everyone else see nothing but a man slowly unraveling. A local historian visited, drawn by rumors. He mentioned something about the land once belonging to a sect that practiced alternative spirituality. But when he saw the fire for himself, he left without another word, without any explanation or advice. I tried looking up the property's history after that, but all I found were dead ends and redacted records. And then one day she disappeared. Sarah. Just gone one morning, no note, no goodbye. That's when I realized something terrifying. Why hadn't we both left weeks ago? The fire was clearly dangerous, clearly wrong, and yet we'd stayed. I couldn't leave. Not wouldn't, couldn't. Somewhere between that first night and now, the fire had wrapped invisible chains around me, drawing me out to watch it every evening, pulling me back whenever I tried to drive away. The worst part? I'd started to find beauty in its persistence, in its perfect, unwavering light. Even now, thinking about leaving made my chest tight with something between panic and loss. The whispers of the flame had grown louder now. Sometimes when I sat by the fire at night, I could almost understand them, admiring the beautiful light of the fire. They promised things, terrible things, beautiful things. I'm writing this now because I finally understood what the fire wants last night. I watched from our bedroom window as the flames took on a familiar shape. A perfect silhouette made of white-hot fire standing in the pit. It raised its burning hand and beckoned to me. The sun is setting and I can already hear the calling. I know I should run, should do something to stop this. But the fire is so beautiful, so perfect. And I'm so cold. If you're reading this, do me a favor. The next time you're sitting around a campfire, listen carefully and see if you hear something in the flames. Maybe they call your name too. Because some fires don't want to die, they want to grow, and they know how to wait. I was just about to close up for the night at the little rural gas station where I worked the evening shift. Nestled between a stretch of empty highway and a dense patch of woods, it was a relic of simpler times. A single pump, a dimly lit storefront, and the faint hum of an old neon sign that flickered with a mind of its own. It was a quiet place, and though its isolation would make some uneasy, I found the solitude comforting. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and I began my routine of locking up. The station had been in my family for generations, and though I'd heard stories of strange happenings from my grandfather, I'd always chalked them up to the ramblings of an old man. Tonight, though, something felt off. As I turned the key in the lock, a soft, rustling noise caught my attention. I paused, listening. The sound seemed to come from the woods. A whisper carried on the wind. I shrugged it off, attributing it to the nocturnal stirrings of wildlife. But as I stepped back inside to finish my closing tasks, that rustling grew more persistent, almost like a voice trying to break through the night's veil. The air smelled different, too, damp and earthy, like the woods after a rain, though no storms had passed through. I shook my head, trying to dispel the unease creeping up my spine. I moved to the back of the store to check the storeroom, my footsteps echoing softly on the worn linoleum. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly, casting long shadows that danced across the shelves. As I reached for the light switch, my hand brushed against something cold and metallic. It was an old key, one I didn't recognize, hanging on a rusty nail that protruded from the wall. Curiosity piqued, I took the key down, examining it in the dim light. It was unmarked, its surface pitted with age. As I held it, the rustling outside seemed to grow louder, a susurrus that wrapped around me like an insistent whisper. It was unsettling, but rationality overrode instinct, and I dismissed it as coincidence. I pocketed the key, thinking little of it, and finished my rounds. The station's lights cast a pale glow into the night, barely reaching the edges of the woods. As I locked the door and stepped out into the cool night air, the rustling ceased, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I walked to my car, parked under the lone street lamp that stood sentry beside the station. As I fumbled for my keys, a soft cry cut through the silence. A distant, mournful wail that sent a chill racing through me. I froze, straining to hear it again. But the night had returned to its usual quiet. Driving home, the road stretched before me, a ribbon of asphalt bordered by trees that seemed to press in closer with each passing mile. My mind replayed the evening's events, each detail magnified by the dark. I tried to shake the feeling that something unseen had followed me, something that lurked just beyond the reach of my headlights. The following day passed uneventfully, the bright sun dispelling the previous night's shadows. I convinced myself it had all been a trick of my imagination, fueled by exhaustion and the solitude of the night shift. But as evening fell and I returned to the station, the unease returned with it. The key weighed heavily in my pocket, and I found myself drawn to it, my fingers tracing its cold surface. The rustling began anew as the sun dipped below the horizon, an insistent whisper that seemed to beckon. Unable to resist, I took the key from my pocket and turned it over in my hand. It felt warm now, pulsing softly as if alive. The whispering grew louder, forming words I couldn't quite understand. My instincts screamed at me to leave it alone, to lock the station and walk away, but something deeper urged me on. I found myself moving toward the back of the store, where an old wooden door stood, one I had never seen opened in all my years working there. The key seemed to fit perfectly, sliding into the lock with a soft click. As I turned it, the whispering stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed down on me like a tangible force. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint, acrid smell that stung my nostrils. I hesitated, every rational part of me screaming to stop, to turn back. But the lure of the unknown was too strong, the key's warmth a comforting presence in my hand. I descended the stairs, each step a hollow echo in the confined space. The darkness seemed to close in around me, erasing the world above. At the bottom, a small room lay shrouded in shadow, the only light a faint glow emanating from the far wall. As I stepped closer, I saw symbols etched into the stone, their lines twisting and turning in an intricate dance. The air was thick with a presence, an ancient force that thrummed with power. My heart pounded in my chest, the rhythm matching the pulse of the key. I reached out, drawn to the symbols, and as my fingers brushed the stone, a surge of cold shot through me, freezing me in place. In that moment, the whispers returned, louder now, their voices a cacophony that filled the room. They spoke of forgotten things, of ancient pacts and broken promises, their words weaving a tapestry of dread that wrapped around me like a shroud. I stumbled back, dropping the key as I fled up the stairs. The whispers followed, their voices rising to a fever pitch, a chorus of warning and promise. I burst through the door, slamming it shut behind me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The station was silent once more, the oppressive presence retreating into the shadows. I left the station that night, locking the door behind me with trembling hands. The key remained below, a relic of a past best left forgotten. But as I drove away, the whispers lingered, a haunting melody that played at the edges of my mind. The road stretched out before me, a path into the unknown, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something watched from the shadows, waiting. In the days that followed, the station stood silent, a sentinel in the night. I avoided it, finding excuses to take shifts elsewhere. But the whispers never truly left. They haunted my dreams, a reminder of the ancient presence that lay beneath. And deep in the woods, where the trees whispered secrets to the night, something stirred, its slumber disturbed by the echoes of an old key and the curiosity of a solitary soul. The rustling returned, a soft, insistent call that promised a reckoning yet to come, and I knew that the past was never truly buried. It was a gray Saturday afternoon when I found myself in the old library on the edge of town. The weather outside was dreary, a persistent drizzle casting a somber mood over the streets, making the library seem like a warm refuge from the chill. I was there to work on a research project for my history class, a mundane task that promised nothing more than hours of scrolling through dusty microfilms and thumbing through aged volumes. The library itself was a relic of a different era, a grand building with sweeping arches and towering bookshelves that seemed to touch the sky. The air was thick with the smell of aged paper and musty leather, a scent I found oddly comforting. The librarian, a quiet woman with gray hair tied in a bun, nodded at me as I entered, her eyes briefly meeting mine before returning to the book she was cataloging. I settled into a corner near the back, where the stacks were less frequented, and began my search. The sound of rain pattering against the windows provided a soothing backdrop, and I lost myself in the rhythm of turning pages and scribbling notes. Hours passed unnoticed until the overhead lights flickered briefly, a minor anomaly I dismissed as an electrical hiccup. As evening approached, the library grew quieter, the few patrons that had been there earlier having drifted away. I decided to take a break, stretching my legs and wandering through the labyrinth of bookshelves. It was then that I noticed something peculiar. A faint humming sound, barely audible, seemed to emanate from the farthest corner of the library. Intrigued, I followed the sound, my footsteps echoing softly against the polished wood floors. The humming grew slightly louder as I approached a section marked Local History. The shelves here were crammed with old maps and dusty tomes chronicling the town's past. Yet, the sound seemed to come from beyond, as though luring me further into the shadows. I hesitated, a shiver of unease prickling my skin. But curiosity got the better of me. As I moved deeper into the stacks, I discovered a door I had never noticed before, tucked away in a dim alcove. It was an unassuming wooden door, its surface scarred with age and neglect. A brass plaque above it read, "Restricted." I knew I shouldn't, but an inexplicable compulsion urged me onward. I reached for the handle, hesitating only briefly before giving it a tentative turn. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The humming was louder now, resonating from below, an eerie melody that tugged at the edges of my consciousness. With each step, the air grew colder, and an unsettling feeling settled in my stomach. The staircase seemed to spiral endlessly downward, and I lost all sense of time. Finally, I reached the bottom, where a dimly lit corridor stretched before me. The walls were lined with shelves crammed with ancient, decaying books. Their spines cracked and titles faded beyond recognition. The humming was all around me now, a dissonant chorus that made my head throb. I found myself drawn to a particular book, its cover a deep green that seemed to pulse faintly under the flickering light. Without thinking, I reached for it, my fingers brushing against the rough leather surface. As I opened the book, a gust of icy wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing the light. I was plunged into darkness, the humming reaching a deafening crescendo. Panic surged through me, and I dropped the book, its pages fluttering wildly before it hit the floor with a resounding thud. In the pitch black, I felt something shift, an almost imperceptible change in the air. It was as though the darkness itself was alive, watching me, its presence oppressive and malevolent. My heart raced, and I backed away, desperate to find the staircase and escape this nightmare. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, each step I took echoing into infinity. The darkness was suffocating, and I stumbled blindly, my hands groping along the walls for any sign of the stairs. The humming was inside my head now, a relentless drone that threatened to drive me mad. Finally, I felt the edge of the first step beneath my foot and scrambled upward, the sound of my own ragged breaths mingling with the haunting melody. It felt like an eternity before I burst through the door at the top, collapsing onto the library floor, gasping for air. The library was silent, the lights steady once more. I lay there for a moment, trembling, trying to make sense of what had happened. The humming had ceased, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the windows. I glanced toward the alcove, half expecting to see the door standing ajar. But it was gone, as though it had never existed. The shelves bore no trace of the forbidden corridor or the mysterious book that had ensnared me. Shakily, I gathered my things and left the library, the librarian watching me with a curious expression as I hurried past. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a chill wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a faint, lingering hum. I never returned to that library, nor did I speak of what I had experienced. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear the humming again, a distant echo that sends chills down my spine, a reminder that the darkness is never far away, lurking just beyond the edge of the known world, waiting to be unleashed by a curious hand. I never imagined that volunteering to clean out my late grandmother's attic would lead to what can only be described as a waking nightmare. It was a Sunday afternoon like any other. The sky was overcast, and the air carried the crispness of early autumn. My parents had decided to sell the old Victorian house, where my grandmother had spent her final years, and it fell upon me, the dutiful granddaughter, to sort through her belongings. The house, nestled at the edge of a quiet suburb, had always felt slightly out of place with its ornate gables and forgotten charm. As a child, I'd marveled at its mystery. But that Sunday, it felt more like a lingering shadow from a time long gone. The attic was accessed by a creaky pull-down ladder, a daunting climb I'd avoided since childhood. As I ascended, the air grew cooler, tinged with the unmistakable scent of mothballs and dust. The attic was a time capsule, filled with forgotten trunks, old furniture, and boxes stacked haphazardly. I set to work, feeling the weight of nostalgia and a slight unease that I quickly brushed aside. As I sifted through boxes of yellowed photographs and brittle letters, I stumbled upon a peculiar object, a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was unlike anything else in the attic, its surface covered in swirling patterns that seemed to writhe when caught in the dim light filtering through the attic window. My curiosity piqued. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of faded velvet, was a tarnished silver pocket watch. I picked it up, feeling a strange chill run down my spine. The watch was cold to the touch, heavier than it looked. Its face was blank, void of numbers or hands. I turned it over, finding an inscription etched into the back. Tempus edax rerum, time, the devourer of all things. As I held the watch, a faint ticking began, so soft it was almost imperceptible. I shook my head, attributing it to an overactive imagination, and placed the watch back in its box. Yet, the moment I did, the sense of being watched crept over me, prickling the hairs on the back of my neck. I tried to shake off the feeling as I continued sorting, but the air in the attic felt thicker, oppressive. Shadows seemed to stretch and shift, contorting into forms that vanished when I blinked. The faint ticking persisted, now intertwined with an echoing whisper, like distant voices carried on a breeze. As the afternoon wore on, the unease mounted. The attic felt alive, breathing in time with the ticking. I paused, peering into the dim corners where the light struggled to reach, half expecting to see someone or something lurking in the shadows. The rational part of me insisted it was nothing, just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. Yet, an unfamiliar dread gnawed at me, urging me to leave. I forced myself to focus, determined to finish the task at hand. I moved to a heavy trunk in the far corner, hoping the distraction would quell the rising panic. The trunk creaked open, revealing a jumble of old clothing, and beneath them, a stack of faded journals. As I lifted the topmost one, the atmosphere shifted. The air around me seemed to hum with energy, the whispering growing louder, more insistent. The words were unintelligible, a language I couldn't understand, yet they resonated deep within me, tapping into a primal fear. I opened the journal, my fingers trembling. The pages were filled with my grandmother's elegant looping script, recounting mundane events interspersed with strange symbols and diagrams that sent a shiver through me. One entry caught my eye. The watch is a key, a tether to what was and what could be. Beware the devouring time. The realization hit me like a cold wave. This was no ordinary heirloom. The watch, with its silent ticking and cryptic inscription, was tied to something far older and darker than I could comprehend. A sudden bang echoed through the attic, and I jumped, dropping the journal. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the room, the shadows now swirling with a life of their own. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, a chorus of unseen voices chanting in unison. I stumbled back, my instincts screaming to flee, yet my feet felt rooted to the spot. The air around me thickened, the chill seeping into my bones. I could feel the presence now, a malevolent force, watching, waiting. It was as if the very house had come alive, its walls closing in, suffocating. Fighting the rising panic, I grabbed the wooden box with the watch and turned to leave. As I did, the attic door slammed shut with a deafening finality. The room plunged into darkness, the only light a faint, eerie glow emanating from the watch now clutched in my hand. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if urging me to act. My mind raced, grasping for logic, for reason, but found none. I was trapped in a nightmare, and the watch was the key, both the cause and the potential escape. Desperation fueled me, and I fumbled with the box, my fingers tracing the intricate carvings. The patterns seemed to pulse, syncing with the ticking watch. I pressed on one of the swirling designs, feeling it give way beneath my touch. Instantly, the attic erupted in a blinding flash of light, the chants reaching a fevered pitch. The world spun, and I felt myself being pulled, stretched through time and space, my consciousness unraveling. When the light faded, I found myself standing in the attic once more, the whispers gone, the air still. The watch lay at my feet, its surface eerily blank, the ticking now silent. I picked it up, feeling the familiar chill, but the unease had dissipated, replaced by a profound emptiness. I descended the ladder, leaving the attic and its secrets behind. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the house. I stood in the driveway, the watch heavy in my pocket, a reminder of the darkness I'd glimpsed. As I walked away, a lingering sense of dread shadowed my steps. The watch was silent, but the knowledge of its power, its connection to something ancient and malevolent, haunted me. I knew I'd escaped its grasp for now, but the whispers of the attic lingered in my mind, a reminder that time, the devourer, waits for no one. The house sold quickly, its secrets buried beneath layers of paint and new memories. Yet, as I settled into my life, a part of me remained tethered to that attic, to the watch and its silent promise. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd only postponed the inevitable, that somewhere the whispers still echoed, waiting for their chance to return. And so, I live with the knowledge that the past is never truly gone, that ancient forces lurk in the shadows of mundane lives. The watch remains with me, a relic of forgotten times, a tether to a darkness that watches and waits, biding its time until the devouring begins anew. I took the job at the old post office in Millbrook, half out of necessity, half out of nostalgia. The small town's beating heart, its quiet pulse, echoed through the brass mailboxes and creaky wooden floors. My shift started at 6 in the evening and ran until the early hours of the morning, perfect for someone like me who found comfort in solitude. As the town wound down, I took solace in the rhythmic drone of sorting mail, the soft thud of envelopes stacking neatly in their slots. That particular evening was no different, or so I thought. The sky had settled into a deep indigo as I locked the front door, the heavy click of the latch resonating through the empty room. The fluorescent lights flickered to life with a dull hum, casting a sterile glow over the rows of mailboxes. I breathed in the musty scent of paper and ink, letting it ground me in the familiar routine. As I sorted through the pile of letters, I came across an envelope unlike the others. It was an ancient-looking thing, yellowed around the edges, with a wax seal that bore an unfamiliar emblem, a serpent coiled around a crescent moon. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers tracing the intricate design. It felt oddly heavy, as though it carried the weight of forgotten histories. Curiosity won over caution, and I placed the envelope on the counter, making a mental note to investigate further after finishing my rounds. The rest of the sorting passed uneventfully, though a strange unease prickled at the back of my mind, like an itch I couldn't quite reach. When the last of the letters had found their homes, I returned to the envelope. Its presence seemed to fill the room, demanding attention. I broke the seal, the wax cracking under my thumb, and unfolded the parchment within. The writing was spidery, almost illegible, but as I squinted in the dim light, the words began to take shape. To the keeper of silence, it began. Heed the whispers of time and shadow. A shiver traced my spine as I read on, the words weaving a tale of a guardian spirit bound to the town, a presence that watched over the sleeping streets. It spoke of a pact made long ago, a binding contract to protect the town from an ancient evil lurking beyond the borders of the known world. As the clock ticked towards midnight, the weight of the letter settled heavily on my shoulders. I glanced around the room, half expecting to see a spectral figure lurking in the shadows, but the post office remained stubbornly empty. Yet, the air felt different, charged with an energy I couldn't quite place. I shook my head, trying to dispel the creeping unease. It was just an old letter, I told myself, a relic of bygone days. But as I turned to lock up for the night, a sound stopped me in my tracks. A faint rustling like the whisper of fabric against stone. It came from the far corner of the room, where the shadows pooled deepest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely breaking the silence. No answer came, only the soft sigh of the wind through the eaves. My heart thudded heavily in my chest as I edged closer, the darkness seeming to thicken with each step. There, nestled between the mailboxes, was a figure, a man, or what had once been a man. His eyes were hollow, empty sockets that stared unseeingly into the void. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence in any way, yet I felt its gaze, felt it probe the depths of my soul. The letter lay forgotten on the counter, its words echoing in my mind. To the keeper of silence. Was that me? Had opening the letter somehow awakened this presence, called it forth from whatever realm it had been banished to? A chill swept through the room, and I knew instinctively that I was not alone, that I would never be alone again. I turned, fleeing the post office, the door slamming shut behind me with a finality that echoed through the night. Outside, the town lay silent, its streets bathed in the cold light of the moon. I ran, my footsteps echoing off the cobblestones, but the feeling of being watched never left me. In the days that followed, I tried to resume my routine, but the post office felt different, tainted by the presence I had unwittingly unleashed. The figure appeared nightly, always in the corner, always watching. I could feel its gaze even when I closed my eyes, a constant reminder of the pact I had broken. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was all a figment of my imagination, but deep down, I knew the truth. The letter had been a warning, a plea left unanswered for too long. And now, the guardian spirit had been replaced by something far more sinister. The townsfolk noticed my change, whispered about the shadow that seemed to cling to me wherever I went. I became a recluse, haunted by the specter I had summoned, unable to escape the chain of events I had set in motion. As I sit here now in the dim light of the post office, I can hear the whispers, soft, insistent, weaving through the air like a dark lullaby. The figure watches, its presence a constant weight on my soul. I know it waits for the right moment, the perfect time to claim what is owed. And so, I continue my vigil, trapped in this silent dance with a ghost of my own making, knowing that the moment I let my guard down will be my last. The post office is my prison, the letter my curse, and the shadows my eternal companions. In the end, the silence is all that remains, a testament to the forgotten promises and the chilling presence that lingers in the dark corners of Millbrook. The keeper of silence, bound forever to an ancient evil, with no hope of redemption or escape. I've always found comfort in the quiet hum of routine, especially on nights like this when the world seems to hold its breath. My job at the small, family-owned laundromat on the edge of town isn't glamorous, but it's steady. It's just me most evenings, tending to the machines, folding stray towels left behind by customers, and listening to the rhythmic churn of the washers. The laundromat sits on a lonely stretch of road, flanked by empty lots and a sagging strip of woods that look blacker than they should under the sodium glow of the streetlights. It's not a place most people linger, but I've grown used to the solitude. At least, I thought I had. It's a Tuesday night nearing 10 p.m., and I'm wiping down the counters with a rag that smells faintly of bleach. The air is thick with the familiar scent of detergent and damp fabric, a scent that's become a second skin to me after 3 years here. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting a sterile sheen over the rows of machines, most of them silent now that the last customer has left. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the glass door in its frame, and I glance out into the dark. The parking lot is empty, save for my beat-up hatchback parked under the single flickering lamp. Nothing unusual, just another night. I finish with the counter and move to the back corner to check on a dryer that's been acting up. As I kneel to inspect the vent, a faint sound catches my ear. A soft, almost melodic hum, like someone singing under their breath. I pause, tilting my head. It's not coming from the machines. They're too mechanical, too predictable. This sound is human, but distant, as if it's seeping through the walls. I stand, brushing my hands on my jeans, and listen harder. The hum stops as abruptly as it started, leaving only the hum of the dryer and the distant howl of the wind. I shake my head, chuckling to myself. Probably just my imagination, or maybe the radio in the office, bleeding through the thin walls. I've been alone too long tonight. But as I turn back to the dryer, I notice something odd. The small, round window on the machine is fogged up, not from heat or moisture, but as if someone breathed on it from the inside. I frown, wiping at the glass with my sleeve. It clears, revealing nothing but tumbling clothes. Still, a prickle of unease creeps up my spine. I tell myself it's nothing, just condensation, a trick of the light. But my eyes dart around the room anyway, scanning the empty rows of washers and the shadowed corners where the light doesn't quite reach. I decide to distract myself by emptying the lint traps, a mindless task that usually calms me. As I pull out the fluffy gray mess from one of the dryers, I notice a small, tarnished coin caught in the mesh. It's not a quarter or a dime, too old, too worn, with strange, spiraling etchings on its surface that don't resemble any currency I've ever seen. I turn it over in my palm, the metal cold against my skin. It feels heavier than it should, almost like it's pulling at me. I laugh under my breath, probably some kid's toy or a trinket someone dropped. Without much thought, I slip it into my pocket, figuring I'll toss it in the lost and found box later. That's when I hear it again, the humming. Louder this time, closer, as if it's just behind me. I spin around, my heart kicking up a notch, but there's nothing there. Just the same empty laundromat, the same flickering lights. The sound fades once more, leaving a hollow silence in its wake. My rational mind scrambles for an explanation. Maybe it's the wind, or a pipe, rattling in the old building. But deep down, I know it's not. There's a weight to the air now, a feeling I can't name, like the moment before a storm breaks. I shake it off and head to the office to grab a soda from the mini fridge, hoping the caffeine will steady my nerves. The office is a cramped, windowless room at the back, cluttered with paperwork and spare parts. As I pop the tab on the can, I notice the small mirror hanging on the wall, something the owner put up for no reason I can fathom. My reflection stares back, pale and tired, but for a split second I swear I see something move behind me in the glass. A shadow, too tall, too thin, with limbs that don't bend right. I whip around, nearly dropping the soda, but the room is empty. My pulse hammers in my ears. Just a trick of the mind, I tell myself. A product of too many late nights and cheap horror movies. but my hands are trembling as I set the can down. I return to the main room, trying to focus on the closing checklist. Sweep the floors, lock the cash drawer, check the machines one last time. But the air feels heavier now, oppressive, like I'm moving through water. The smell of detergent is still there, but it's undercut by something else. Something faint and sour, like damp earth or rotting leaves. I can't place it, but it makes my stomach turn. I glance at the glass door again, half expecting to see someone standing in the parking lot, watching. There's nothing but darkness, yet I can't shake the feeling of eyes on me, boring into the back of my skull. I decide to speed through the last of my tasks, eager to lock up and get home. As I sweep near the row of folding tables, I hear a soft clink from my pocket, the coin. I pull it out, studying it under the light. The etchings seem deeper now, almost like they're shifting, curling into shapes that remind me of old runes or symbols from forgotten books. A memory flickers, something my grandmother used to say about things better left buried, warnings tied to the land around here, stories of settlers who vanished into the woods and never came back. I scoff at myself. Superstition, nothing more. Still, I can't bring myself to put the coin back in my pocket. Instead, I set it on the counter, near the lost and found box, as if distancing myself from it will ease the growing knot in my chest. That's when the lights flicker. Not just a quick stutter, but a slow, deliberate dimming, like someone's turning a dial. The hum of the machines falters, replaced by a low, resonant drone that vibrates in my bones. I freeze, broom in hand, my breath shallow. The temperature drops, sharp and sudden, my exhaled breath visible in the air. The humming returns, no longer distant but all around me, weaving through the air like a chorus of whispers, too many voices to count. They're not singing anymore. They're murmuring, pleading, or maybe warning, the words just out of reach. I force myself to move, to rationalize. A power surge, a draft from the old vents. But my instincts scream otherwise. Something is here. Something I can't see but can feel. A presence that presses against the edges of my awareness. I glance at the coin on the counter, and for a moment, I swear it trembles, as if alive. My hand hovers over it, torn between tossing it away and keeping it close, like it's a tether to whatever's happening. I don't know why, but I feel like picking it up again was a mistake. A key turned in a lock I can't close. The lights dim further, plunging the laundromat into near darkness. The shadows stretch, pooling in corners and under machines, too deep, too solid. And then I see it, a shape in the reflection of the glass door. Not outside, but inside, behind me. It's not human, not entirely. Too tall, too gaunt, its edges blurring into the dark like smoke. I don't turn around, I can't. My body locks up, every muscle screaming to run, but my feet are rooted to the floor. The whispers grow louder, sharper, scraping at the inside of my skull. They're not words I know, but I understand the intent. A hunger, ancient and endless, awakened by something as small as a coin in my pocket. I force myself to breathe, to think. I need to get out. I need to lock the door and drive away and never come back. But the shape in the reflection shifts, closer now, and I feel a cold breath on my neck, though there's no one there. My hand brushes the coin again, and the whispers spike, a cacophony of rage and desperation. I yank my hand back, stumbling toward the door, my keys jangling in my trembling fingers. The glass rattles as I fumble with the lock, and in the reflection, I see it fully now, limbs too long, a face that isn't a face, just a void with something glinting where eyes should be. It doesn't move, but it's closer, always closer, as if space itself is folding around it. I get the door open, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I don't look back as I sprint to my car, the whispers chasing me, echoing in the empty lot. I slam the door shut, lock it, and peel out onto the road, the laundromat shrinking in my rearview mirror. My heart doesn't slow until I'm miles away. The coin's still on the counter where I left it, or at least, I hope it is. I don't know if it matters. I felt that presence latch onto me like a shadow I can't shake, tied to me by a single, thoughtless act. When I get home, I lock every door, draw every curtain, but the feeling doesn't leave. The air in my apartment is too still, too heavy, and I swear I hear that humming again, faint from the other side of the walls. I don't sleep. I sit with the lights on, staring at nothing, wondering if I brought something back with me or if it was always waiting, biding its time until I stumbled into its path. I think about the coin, about the stories my grandmother told, about things that cling to the edges of the world, waiting for an invitation. I don't know if I'll go back to the laundromat tomorrow. I don't know if I have a choice. But I do know this. Whatever I felt, whatever I saw, it's not done with me. And somewhere, in the dark stretch of road and woods beyond, it's still watching, still whispering, waiting for the next careless hand to pick up what should have stayed lost. The night I stayed late at the office, I told myself it was nothing more than a favor, a simple act of responsibility, the sort that earned approving nods in performance reviews, nothing sinister or unusual. I worked in a squat, glass and concrete building at the edge of a business park, the sort of place where the lights always hummed and the carpets always smelled faintly of vacuum dust. The cleaning crew had already come and gone, leaving the corridors with that vague, lemony tang and the faint, chemical wetness of mopped tile. My cubicle was a little island of pale monitor light in a sea of darkness. The only sound, the quiet, rhythmic click of my keyboard. It was nearly midnight when I finished sorting the last of the quarterly reports. The building was silent, save for the soft, distant hum of the vending machine down the hall. I stood, stretched, and glanced at the darkened row of cubicles. Only the red exit sign glowed at the far end, its reflection jittering in the glass doors. I laughed to myself, feeling a childish urge to run rather than walk to the elevator, the way I used to when I turned off the basement lights at my parents' house. But I was an adult now, and this was just a building. As I gathered my things, my phone buzzed, a low, insistent vibration that seemed oddly loud in the stillness. A message from my manager. Thanks again. Don't forget to lock up. I thumbed a quick reply and shut down my computer, the sudden absence of its whirring fan making the silence deeper. I moved through the maze of cubicles, my footsteps muffled on the industrial carpet, the punch of the security code at the supply closet door echoing in the empty space. I was almost to the lobby when I realized I'd left my coffee mug behind. It was an old, battered thing, but I liked it. A little piece of home in the sterile office. Annoyed, I retraced my steps, weaving through the familiar gray partitions. That's when I noticed the smell. Something wrong, faint at first. Not the usual lemon or dust, but a sweet, cloying scent, like flowers left too long in a vase. I paused, sniffed the air, dismissing it. Maybe the cleaning crew had used a different product. My mug was where I'd left it, next to a stack of manila folders. I picked it up and turned to leave, but I stopped short. My monitor was back on, white screen glowing in the darkness. I was certain I'd shut it down. Habit, really. The same as every night. I stared at the login screen, the pale blue cursor blinking with steady patience. I told myself I'd made a mistake, that maybe I'd only logged out instead of powering down. Still, the little hairs at the back of my neck prickled. I pressed the power button, holding it down until the screen winked to black. I waited just to be sure, then turned away. As I passed the conference room, I caught a flicker of movement inside. Reflex made me look, but the room was empty. Just the ghostly reflection of my own shape in the glass wall, warped and doubled by the darkness. I frowned, heart thumping a little faster. The air was colder here, the temperature dropping a few degrees in just a few steps. I told myself not to be silly. The HVAC system was old. It always cycled strangely at night. Down the hall, the vending machine's light flickered. The hum that had been steady all night now pulsed, a faint, irregular rhythm. I passed it quickly, resisting the urge to glance at the warped reflections in its glass. I pushed through the lobby doors and froze. The security lights were off, That was odd. They always stayed on until 2. The receptionist's desk was a dark shape in the gloom, and the glass doors leading to the parking lot were smeared with condensation, as if someone had pressed their face to the glass. I hesitated, then approached, peering out into the sodium-lit lot. My car was the only one left, its windshield a dull, cloudy oval in the yellow light. As I reached for the handle, I heard it. A soft, wet clicking, like tongue on teeth from somewhere behind me. I spun around, heart leaping, but there was nothing there. Just the empty lobby, the glow of the exit sign, and the distant shapes of cubicles beyond. I laughed, the sound thin and too loud. "Get a grip," I muttered, and yanked open the door. The night air was sharp, with the promise of rain. I hurried across the lot, fumbling for my keys, mug clutched tight in my hand. As I unlocked the car, I glanced back at the building. The office windows stared back, blank and dark, except for a faint flickering light on the second floor. My floor. I stared, confused. I'd turned everything off, yet there it was. A single pale square of light, fluttering as if from a candle. I almost walked away. I almost convinced myself to drive off, leave it for the morning. But I couldn't shake the feeling, part guilt, part dread, that I'd left something undone, something small and important. Maybe another computer had been left on. Maybe the cleaning crew had missed it. I went back. The glass door stuck, refusing to open at first, as if something heavy pressed on the other side. I should have left it. Instead, I braced my shoulder and shoved, the rubber seals giving with a sticky squeal. The lobby was colder now, the air thick with that same sweet, rotten smell. My footsteps echoed as I made my way to the elevator, which waited with its doors open, as if expecting me. Inside, the lights buzzed overhead, but the button for my floor was already pressed. I hesitated, then poked it again, watching the doors slide shut. The ride was slow, the kind of slow where you can hear every gear and cable working, every groan of metal. When the doors opened, the hallway was dark, except for the flickering light at the far end. I walked toward it, the shadows stretching and shrinking as I moved. The smell was stronger here, thick and syrupy, tinged with something metallic. The light came from my cubicle, or rather, from the space just beyond it, the little copy room we use for shredding files. The door was ajar, a thin line of golden light spilling out. I approached, and the clicking sound returned, soft, wet, rhythmic. Hand shaking, I pushed the door open. The room was empty, save for the copier and the shredder, both dark and silent. But on the floor, in a perfect circle, were a dozen white flowers. Lilies, I thought, or maybe something else. Their petals bruised and browning at the edges. In the center was my mug, upright, filled with a thick, dark liquid that wasn't coffee. I stared, trying to make sense of it. Had someone been here? A prank, maybe, though I couldn't think who would do it, or how they'd gotten in. I reached for the mug, my hand trembling. As my fingers closed around the handle, the lights flickered, and the air grew colder still. The clicking sound grew louder, echoing from the vents, the walls, the very floor. For a moment, I saw movement in the corner of my eye, a shape, black and slick, slipping along the ceiling tiles. I spun, but it was gone. My heart hammered in my chest. I stumbled backward, mug still in hand, and nearly tripped over the ring of flowers. The petals brushed my ankles, papery and cold, and I recoiled as if stung. The corridor outside was darker than before, the exit sign at the end now guttering, its red light smeared and dim. I ran, not caring how loud my footsteps sounded, not caring if I looked ridiculous. I jammed the elevator button, but nothing happened. The doors stayed stubbornly shut, the lights above them flickering and dying. I turned for the stairs, plunging down the concrete steps 2 at a time, the sound of the clicking chasing me, growing louder and sharper with every floor. The ground level was suffocatingly cold, the lobby lights now dead. The glass doors were fogged over, and as I reached them, my breath caught. On the outside, a handprint, long-fingered, smeared, trailed across the glass, as if something had pressed against it from the other side. I bolted, shoving the doors open, running to my car. I fumbled the keys, dropping them once, twice, before finally wrenching the door open and collapsing behind the wheel. My hands shook as I turned the ignition, headlights spilling over the empty lot. As I drove away, I looked back once. In the upper floor window, a shape watched me, A shadow, tall and impossibly thin, its outline shimmering in the glass. The flickering light behind it died, plunging the window into darkness. I didn't sleep that night. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, that my mind had played tricks on me, but when I emptied my bag the next morning, the mug was gone. In its place, wrapped in a sheet of office paper, was a single wilted white flower. Its petals were flecked with something dark, almost black, and the smell that rose from it was sweet, rotting, and unmistakable. I left the job a week later. I told my manager I'd found something better, that I wanted to move on. I never told her about the mug, or the flowers, or the thing that watched from the window. But some nights, when the house is quiet and the clock ticks over to midnight, I hear it. The soft, wet clicking just beyond the walls. And sometimes, when I pass a window, I catch a glimpse of something reflected behind me, tall and thin and waiting. I wonder sometimes if it was the mug, my innocent need to reclaim something of my own, that invited it in. Or maybe it was always there, waiting for someone to stay late, to break the rhythm of the ordinary, to make just the right mistake. I don't know if it's finished with me, but I do know this. The office building stands empty now, its windows dark, the lot overgrown. And if you walk past at night, you might catch a whiff of something sweet and rotten on the wind. If you do, don't look back. And whatever you do, don't go inside. I've always liked the quiet of the early morning, especially in my childhood home. It's a small, two-story house at the edge of a sleepy suburb, surrounded by overgrown hedges and a sagging wooden fence that hasn't been fixed since I was a kid. I moved back in a few months ago after my mom passed, just to sort through her things and decide what to do with the place. At 32, I'm not exactly thrilled to be sleeping in my old bedroom, surrounded by faded posters of bands I barely remember. But there's a strange comfort in the routine of it all. Every morning, I brew a pot of coffee in the kitchen, the same chipped percolator humming on the counter, and I sit at the dining table to scroll through emails or jot down to-do lists. It's mundane, predictable, and exactly what I need to keep my head on straight. This morning started like any other. The sky outside was a pale gray, the kind of dawn that promises rain but never quite delivers. I shuffled downstairs in my slippers, the wooden steps creaking under my weight, and started the coffee. The house was silent except for the faint drip of the percolator and the occasional groan of the old radiator in the corner. I sat at the table, my laptop open, half-heartedly replying to a work email about a project deadline. The kitchen window faced the backyard, where the grass was long and wild, swaying slightly, even though there was no breeze I could feel. I glanced at it briefly, then back to my screen. Routine. Normal. But then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It was so soft at first that I thought I'd imagined it, like a fingernail brushing against wood, coming from somewhere upstairs. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, and listened. Tap, tap, tap. It stopped as abruptly as it started, leaving the house in that heavy, oppressive silence again. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses settle, pipes knock, maybe a branch was scraping against the roof. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the sound wasn't random. It had a deliberate quality, like someone testing a surface, searching for something. I pushed the thought aside and focused on my coffee, taking a sip. It was bitter, too strong, but I didn't care. I needed the jolt. As I set the mug down, I noticed the smell. Faint, almost imperceptible at first, like damp earth or rotting leaves. It wasn't unusual for the house to smell musty. The basement had always been prone to leaks, and I hadn't aired the place out in weeks. But this was different, sharper, like something had crawled up from the ground and lingered just out of sight. I wrinkled my nose and stood to check the sink, thinking maybe something had gone bad in the drain. Nothing. The smell faded as quickly as it came, leaving me standing there, feeling foolish for even noticing it. I sat back down, trying to shake off the unease. My laptop screen glowed in the dim kitchen, and I forced myself to focus on the email. But my eyes kept drifting to the hallway that led to the stairs. The house felt off. Not in any way I could pin down, just a subtle wrongness, like a picture hung slightly crooked. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I'd been alone here for weeks without issue. Grief does funny things to the mind, makes you see shadows where there aren't any. Still, I couldn't ignore the prickling at the back of my neck, that instinctive feeling of being watched, even though I knew I was alone. After finishing my coffee, I decided to get some fresh air. I needed to clear my head. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door and stepped outside into the backyard. The grass was wet with dew and the air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine from the trees lining the property. I walked toward the old shed at the far end of the yard, a rickety structure my dad had built when I was a kid. Mom had used it to store gardening tools, but I hadn't been inside since I got back. I figured I'd check it out, maybe start clearing things out. Routine maintenance, something to keep my hands busy. The shed door was stiff, the hinges rusted from years of neglect. I yanked it open with a grunt, and a wave of that same damp, earthy smell hit me, stronger this time, mixed with something metallic I couldn't place. Inside, the shed was a mess of cobwebs and dust, with old shovels and rakes leaning against the walls. In the corner, half buried under a pile of cracked flower pots, was a small wooden box I didn't recognize. It was plain, unadorned, about the size of a shoebox, with a simple latch. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to it, like it was waiting for me to find it. I crouched down, brushing away the debris, and picked it up. The wood was cold to the touch, almost unnaturally so, and as I held it, I swear I felt a faint vibration, like a heartbeat pulsing through the grain. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the latch. Every instinct screamed at me to put it down, to walk away. But curiosity got the better of me. I told myself it was just a box, probably something Mom had stashed away and forgotten. I flicked the latch open. Inside was nothing but a layer of dirt, dark and rich, like it had been scooped straight from a grave. No papers, no trinkets, just earth. I frowned, confused, and as I tilted the box to get a better look, I heard that tapping again, louder this time, coming from the house. Tap, tap, tap. My head snapped up, my heart thudding in my chest. The sound was unmistakable now, deliberate, like someone or something was pacing upstairs, dragging a finger along the walls. I slammed the box shut and stood, my breath shallow. The backyard felt smaller somehow, the trees looming closer, their branches casting jagged shadows across the grass. I hurried back to the house, the box tucked under my arm, telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe a neighbor was working on something, or a bird had gotten trapped in the attic. But as I stepped inside, the air felt heavier, thicker, like I'd walked into a room where someone had just been arguing. The smell of damp earth followed me, clinging to my clothes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd done something wrong, something I couldn't undo. By opening that box, I set it on the kitchen table, staring at it like it might move on its own. The tapping had stopped, but the silence was worse, suffocating. I glanced at the hallway again, half expecting to see a shadow at the top of the stairs. Nothing. Just the dim light filtering through the curtains. I forced a laugh, trying to break the tension, but it came out hollow, echoing in the empty house. I needed to get a grip. I decided to take the box back to the shed later after I'd calmed down. For now, I'd ignore it. The rest of the morning passed uneventfully, but the unease lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. I kept catching whiffs of that earthy smell, even after I'd washed my hands twice. Around noon, I heard the tapping again, softer this time, almost tentative, coming from the ceiling directly above me, my old bedroom. I froze, my pulse racing. There was no way a bird or a branch could make that sound, not with that kind of rhythm. It was too human, too intentional. I wanted to go upstairs and check, but my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I sat there, listening as the taps grew slower, more deliberate, like whatever it was knew I was listening back. By late afternoon, the house felt like a stranger's. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights made me jump. I tried to distract myself by sorting through Mom's old papers in the living room, but my eyes kept drifting to the kitchen, to that box on the table. I hadn't touched it since I brought it inside, but I swore the lid was slightly ajar now, even though I remembered shutting it tight. I told myself it was my imagination, but the prickling at the back of my neck wouldn't go away. And then I saw it, a faint smudge of dirt on the table, trailing from the box toward the edge, like something had dragged itself out. Oh, my stomach dropped. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor, and backed away. The smudge wasn't there before, I was sure of it. I grabbed a rag and wiped it clean, my hands shaking. But the smell of earth was stronger now, almost suffocating. The tapping started again, louder, faster, coming from the hallway this time, like footsteps descending the stairs. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat, but the hallway was empty. The light at the top of the stairs flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the wall, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move. Just a blur, a shape too tall and too thin to be human, vanishing around the corner. I wanted to run, to grab my keys and get out, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. My rational mind screamed that I was imagining things, that stress and grief were playing tricks on me, but my gut knew better. Whatever I'd let out of that box wasn't just in my head. It was here, in the house, watching me, waiting. I could feel its presence now, a weight pressing down on me, cold and ancient, like it had been buried in the earth for centuries, biding its time until someone like me was stupid enough to release it. I forced myself to move, grabbing the box and stumbling toward the back door. I'd bury it, burn it, do whatever it took to get rid of it. But as I reached for the knob, the tapping turned into a low, resonant thud, shaking the walls, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air grew icy, my breath fogging in front of me, and I heard a sound like a whisper, too faint to make out the words, but full of malice, curling around me like smoke. I turned, my heart pounding, and saw the hallway light flicker out completely, plunging the house into darkness, even though the sun hadn't set yet. And then I saw it. Eyes, or what I thought were eyes, glowing faintly in the shadows at the top of the stairs. They weren't human, too wide, too unblinking, set in a face I couldn't fully see, a face that wasn't there at all, just a void where something should have been. The whisper grew louder, a hiss of syllables I didn't understand, and the box in my hands vibrated violently, the lid rattling as if something inside was trying to claw its way out. I dropped it, the wood splintering as it hit the floor, and a wave of that metallic, earthy smell overwhelmed me, making my vision swim. I don't know how I made it outside. I just remember running, the grass cold and wet under my feet, the shed looming in the distance like a tomb. I didn't look back, couldn't bear to see if those eyes were following me. I locked myself in my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys and drove until the house was out of sight. I'm at a motel now, miles away, but I can still smell the earth on my body, no matter how much I wash myself.